In this video, I'll show you how to quickly install and set up Oracles VirtualBox. We're going to get it running on your local computer so you can experiment with new operating systems, test new software, or do just about anything you want in a virtual environment. So let's get started. Today, we'll be installing VirtualBox on a Windows 11 host. Before we get this process started though, we'll need to check to see if virtualization is enabled on our host. We can do that by clicking Ctrl-Shift-Escape and opening up the Task Manager. Then we'll want to go to the Performance CPU section and then in the lower right hand corner check for virtualization. If it's enabled, you're good to go. If it's not, then you'll need to enable virtualization in your BIOS. We're not going to cover that in this video, but if you want more details on how to do this, check the link below or the link in the description. Once we've checked our virtualization status, we can go ahead and close the Task Manager. Now we'll want to visit virtualbox.org and look for this download VirtualBox link. And then we'll click it. From here, we'll see a list of packages to choose. We're going to be installing on Windows 11, so let's click the Windows 11 host. Now that we've downloaded VirtualBox, let's run through the install process. Let's go ahead and click Next. We'll want to go ahead and choose all of the custom options. We'll get a small warning, but we can ignore this. Click Yes. We'll also want to install all the dependencies. Now we're ready to install. There we go, VirtualBox is installed. Let's go ahead and keep the checkmark box checked and click Finish to start VirtualBox. Now that we have VirtualBox installed, you should see an interface very similar to this. This is the main interface that houses all of the virtual machines that we'll be installing. As you can see, I don't have any installed right now, but once that's done, you'll begin to see how each one of the virtual machines is managed. Let's get started by clicking the New button. This will open up a dialog that will allow us to begin to set up the process of a new VM. We want to go ahead and give the VM a name, and in this instance, we're going to be installing Ubuntu, which is a very popular Linux distribution, so we'll give it a name. The folder that all of the data will be stored to is located right below. If you're going to be storing a lot of VMs, you might consider changes the location. However, if you're just installing a few, this one should be just fine. The next thing that you'll need to install is something called an ISO image. An ISO image is basically all the contents of the setup on a file, very similar to what you would see on a DVD or a CD. In order to get that ISO image, we need to go to Ubuntu's website to download it. So we're going to browse to ubuntu.com. We're going to click on the download link. We'll click Get Ubuntu Desktop. We're going to scroll down here and grab the very latest version of Ubuntu. Now, one thing you'll want to pay attention to are all the settings here. These settings will need to be applied to the virtual machine when you set it up. So let's go ahead and click the download button and get the latest version of Ubuntu. Now that we have our ISO downloaded, we'll want to go ahead and choose it from the ISO image dropdown. Once you've chosen it, you should see that the type and the version are automatically detected. Let's go ahead and click Next. Now we'll want to choose a username and password. I recommend you change this if you can. You also want to make sure that the guest additions is checked. This adds additional features that help your virtual machine work a little bit more effectively. Let's go ahead and click Next. In this screen, we want to go ahead and set our base memory and our processors. As you recall on the Ubuntu screen, there were some settings for what they recommend. You want to go ahead and try and follow these the best you can. Just remember, all of this can be changed later, so if you don't get it perfect, you can change it later. Let's go ahead and click Next. The next section is creating a virtual hard disk. I recommend going with it dynamically at first, and then as you get more familiar with setting up virtual machines, you can pre-allocate sizes. Remember, when you check the pre-allocation, it will automatically take all of that space that you ask it to pre-allocate. Let's go ahead and click Next. Now we've got a summary of everything that's getting ready to happen for the virtual machine. We're going to go ahead and finish this up. Now you should see a screen on the right hand side saying powering the VM up. This begins the install process for setting up your new Ubuntu system. And as you see here, it will begin to start to try the install process. If you have any issues, you can always do a quick Google search, but for most parts, I found that the Linux distributions install quite easily. Alright, once VirtualBox is installed, you should see a login prompt. You'll want to use the credentials that you used at setup time. If you use the default ones, go ahead and log in now. Now that we've logged into our VirtualBox, we'll see that it's a full operating system ready to be used just like any other operating system that might be installed on your regular computer. You can browse Firefox, you can install applications, you can basically do everything you need. So notable things that you'll need to do when you first get started is change the resolution. And you can do that by clicking on the View menu up at the top and then scrolling down to whatever resolution you would like. I'm going to choose 1280 by 720. As you can see, it resized the window. However, if I want to resize it so that it'll resize to fit the window, I can also do that as well. Just choose the Auto Resize Guest Display, and this will automatically fill the entire window. Now, some notable things that you'll want to consider when you're working with your VM is turning it on and off. We can do all of that through the Machine menu. So if you come up here and you click Pause, basically what pause allows you to do is to free up any resources. So say you had allocated 8 gigs of memory and 2 CPUs. If you pause it, that will give it all back to the host machine. You can also reset it, which will basically reset it just like you would your regular computer, and you can shut it down. So the last thing I want to touch on here are snapshots, and the best way to talk about a snapshot is with an example. Say, for example, you install 5 different applications. After you've tested all those 5 applications, you wanted to remove them. Well, on a traditional install, what you'd have to do is go back and uninstall every single one of those applications. With a snapshot, what you can do is before you install those applications, you take a snapshot, you install all 5 applications, and then after you've done tested those 5 applications, you just revert back to the snapshot, and that way you don't have to uninstall any of those particular programs. This is just a great way for you to save time. Okay, to round off this video, we're going to do one more quick installation of a different operating system, and in this case, we'll go ahead and start with a Windows 11 install. So as we did before, we're going to click the New button. We're going to go ahead and give this a name. I'm going to use the same folder that I used before. Now, I've already pre-downloaded the Windows ISO, and what you'll want to do is go out to Windows website. So make sure you're going to Microsoft. Don't get these ISOs from a third-party resource. Make sure you're going directly to the vendor. You'll want to download the ISO, and all of these links will be in the description. So if you need these links, just go ahead and check that down there. As you can see, it went ahead and found that in this ISO files, I'll be installing Windows 11. We're going to go ahead and click Next. And as we did before, we want to make sure the Guest Additions is checked, and we'll click Next. And we're just going to use the defaults for the hardware acceleration here. And we'll leave the defaults. As you noticed on the Windows one, it actually upgraded from 25 gigs to 80 gigs. So there is some settings in VirtualBox that kind of help guide you through some of this. And as I said before, you can always change these later. So we'll go ahead and choose 80. We'll check our summary real quick, and we'll click Finish. Now this will start the Windows setup process, and you can see that's powering up on the right-hand side. Now as Windows starts up, you'll want to go ahead and make sure to click the Enter key. If you don't click the Enter key on this, then you'll get an error and it'll say bootload error. So make sure when you see that you hit the Enter key. I ran into that a couple times where it just kept booting with an error. So right when you see that, go ahead and start that. And as you can see here, VirtualBox is reading from the ISO file, and it's going to start the whole setup process. Now, as you can see, it's going to go ahead and start running through the Windows install process. This one takes a little bit longer than Ubuntu. I think on some of my cases, it ran around 5 to 10 minutes. So you go ahead and wait that process out, and you'll get it installed. All right, our setup has been completed, and as you can see here, we have Windows 11 ready to go and ready to use. So that should wrap up the install and setup of VirtualBox. If you have any other questions, leave them in the comments below. If you have a chance, check us out at gridlife.io, and we'll see you in the next video.